Welcome back to the Cannabis Review. Thanks everybody for joining again for another great episode. I'm delighted to have this gentleman on the show today. I'm going to introduce you to none other than Robert Jappie. He's a partner at Ince firm. If you know the cannabis industry at all, you'd know Robert's name very well. For those of you who don't, how you doing, Robert? Are you well?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm excellent, thank you very much. Delighted to have you on the show, a man with a lot of inside knowledge. You're hopefully going to be able to explain a couple of simple topics to the audience.
Sure. Well, look, thank you very much for having me on. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you very much. Can you just give everybody a little rough background on how you got into the cannabis industry? I know you worked in charities and all that kind of stuff and led to it. So maybe give everybody just a brief overview of how you got to Ince law firm and being a partner in the cannabis sector.
Yeah, sure. So I was actually a criminal defense lawyer for many years, but I took a break from that and I ended up working for a charity called Release. And Release is a drugs and human rights charity. They campaign for the decriminalisation of drug possession. They think drug use should be a public health issue, not a criminal justice issue. So I was on their legal team there for a couple of years, and there was lots of policy work and lobbying of the government. And cannabis legalisation was rolling out across the US, and I just thought this is going to be big in Europe one day. You know, it's going to blow up here eventually. So about almost 3 years ago, I set up the UK's first dedicated cannabis law department. And at that time, there was a small CBD industry. It was growing very quickly, though. And so immediately, you know, they were so happy to have a lawyer helping them navigate this difficult regulatory environment. And then a few months later, the UK Home Office suddenly legalized medicinal cannabis, much to everyone's surprise. And things just snowballed from there. So since then, all I've been doing is providing regulatory and commercial support to CBD businesses and medicinal cannabis businesses. And yeah, I'm a very lucky man. It's a great job to have, and it's a great industry to be involved in.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's one of the exciting new industries you can to be a part of. Leads me on to kind of the first topic of conversation that I wanted to ask you about is the CBD regulation and compliance, EU versus the UK. Like, we know we've got Brexit coming. We know there's multiple companies now in Ireland and the UK who are looking to sell their products in different markets. What are the hurdles that are there at the moment, and what hurdles do you see coming after Brexit, or do you see it being a much more freer industry?
So one of the main issues is obviously THC content in CBD products. Now, most people are sort of driving towards non-detectable levels of THC, but a lot of people, they still want to sell full spectrum products because consumers like full spectrum products. You know, they like that entourage effect. They like that mix of cannabinoids. We have this 0.2% THC limit, which relates to cultivation in Europe. And a lot of people think, well, that means I can have 0.2% THC in my CBD product. It's not actually correct in the UK. We have something called the 1 milligram rule. So you've got to be really careful when, you know, sending your products out across Europe, what the THC limit is in that particular jurisdiction, because it doesn't apply just Europe-wide. The other issue is here in the UK, we can't extract CBD. We can cultivate hemp under a license, but we can't actually use the bud and the flower and all the good stuff to produce our own CBD here. So in fact, in the UK, we import all of our CBD. It comes from mainland Europe. It comes from the US. There's a lot of product coming in from the US. And of course, Brexit is going to cause a big problem with import and export of products into the UK. Probably the distillates and the isolates being imported from the US will be largely unaffected because, you know, if there's additional customs declarations, then they can be done whilst the product is in transit. But product coming in from mainland Europe, if it's coming through the Channel Tunnel, then, you know, there could be significant delays to the lorries, to the shipments moving into the UK. So very hopeful that this government will get their act together and sign a good deal with the EU, but I'm not holding my breath at the moment. Who knows what's going to happen? And it's a bit worrying. We're getting so close and there's still so much uncertainty. So it's a big problem.
Yeah, it's the year 2020. I think nobody's putting anything off the cards when it comes to
this year needs to end, please, so we can start afresh next year.
Yeah, that's it. I think so. I think it just on this last topic, is there an issue over here in Ireland? You can put your product on the shelf if it's a cold pressed isolate CBD. Is that the same in the UK?
So the cold press issue relates to novel foods. So just to give you a sort of a little bit of background on novel foods, basically it's an EU regulation which said that any product which hadn't been in regular human consumption prior to 1997 is deemed novel. So if there's no human history of consumption, you need a license from the European Union, from the European Commission, to be able to sell it legally. And there's been this whole big argument about, is CBD a novel food? Is it a new food? Now, many people have argued, well, hemp has been in the human diet for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So therefore, hemp extracts from the plant, should also be considered not novel. However, the current position appears to be that the hemp plant is not novel. If you squeeze the juice out of the hemp plant, that's fine as well. As soon as you take that raw material, that raw extract, and put it through additional processes, refinement, distillation, that sort of thing, you are creating a new product, a novel product. So the current position is, if you're using CO2 extraction or ethanol extraction or any sort of high-tech extraction method, then you are creating a novel product. If you are using a cold press, so you're just taking the hemp plant and you're squeezing it, and then you're using that as your product. Maybe you bulk it a little bit with some MCT or some coconut oil. That should not be a novel product. And there's lots of information on the U.K FSA website, the food regulators, which confirms that yes, a cold pressed product should be exempt from the novel food regime. So I think a lot of people are sort of thinking, right, okay, well, let's start using cold pressed products rather than, the CO2 extraction, which was very, very popular.
Okay, and that kind of leads us in as we moved into the novel food license. Can you kind of explain? I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people out there who set up brands who think that they're going to be able to get another novel food license. Can you kind of, let's put a bit of reality on this situation. The steps to kind of get a novel food license are going to require hundreds of thousands of euro. Would I be right in saying that?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the novel food process is very long, very expensive, very difficult. Okay, so the reason being is that it's a big safety analysis which has to be done in a laboratory. So the central part of this novel food application is what's called a tox study, a toxicology study. So they do, this lengthy scientific study. It can be 9 months. Some people are saying 18 months. And that's where the expense comes in. And this toxicology study forms the central part of a novel food submission. So in reality, probably only the biggest and wealthiest companies will actually be able to go through the process. So what happens to the SMEs, to the smaller brands, to the smaller businesses? Well, they do not necessarily have to do a novel food application themselves. They've got two options. They can either go into a consortium approach. So there's some organizations which are grouping companies together to share the cost burden and work together to get this novel food submission in. So you've got the Association of Cannabinoid Industries here in the UK. You've also got the European Industrial Hemp Association, who are doing great work at the moment, and they've got their own consortium approach. So if you're an SME and you can't afford to do your own novel food application, you can join one of the consortiums. The other option is to piggyback off someone else's submission. So for example, if you have a big company that's doing a novel food submission, you can then sign a supply deal with them. So they can effectively be your supplier. They can either supply you the material ingredient, your CBD isolate or your distillate, which will be novel food approved under their submission, or they can even white label your products for you. So they can produce your product line and you will be able to assert novel food compliance from your supplier's submission. The only difficulty with that is they're gonna expect something in return. So whilst you want to piggyback off their novel food license, they're going to try and tie you in for a long supply contract, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. They've got to make that expense that they spent on getting this approval worth their while, and that's the idea. That's why big companies will do the application, because they will expect lots of people to be buying their products, white labeling for lots of other companies, that sort of thing. So the route to compliance, it doesn't mean you have to do your own application. You just have to be able to assert novel food compliance, and that can be either through a consortium or as I said, piggybacking off your supplier's submission.
Yeah, it seems like the big companies are going to be the ingredient, shall we say, for
That's
a
correct.
lot of the smaller to medium-sized enterprises and the big enterprises. And if you can imagine, when the big players start getting into this, those ingredient companies I think are going to see good returns on it, the likes of Mile High and a couple of the other big ones, I think. Do you think there'll be enough companies who are successful with the novel food license that there's good competition on the market? Or do you see it being 2 or 3 and the prices are just ridiculous?
I think there will be a limited number, but hopefully it will still be enough choice for people, to be able to shop around a little bit. So you're right, Mile High have been the sort of leaders on this, and I think a few months ago they already confirmed that they had made their submission and were awaiting validation. You've got big companies like Sativa Group PLC, you've got Dragonfly, British Cannabis. All of these guys are going to be novel food compliant ingredient suppliers. The last I heard from the UK FSA is that they had received between 8 and 10 applications. That will probably increase between now and the 1st of January. How many will get approved, I don't know, but I would hope you would see at least 10 to 15 companies who are getting approved, which will give the SMEs and the brands a bit more choice of who they work with. But yeah, look, if my message to the brands is start looking at your supply chain now. This is actually the whole point of novel foods. The regulators want brands to be more aware of their supply chain, where their product is coming from. Is it a high quality product? So if your supplier is not engaged in the novel food process now, you need to start having a look around and start thinking about who do I want to do business with from this point onwards.
Yeah, I think that's sage advice to any of the companies out there. It's get your supply chain in order now, get all the pieces of the puzzle together for to be able to facilitate your company to grow in this market. Last topic I just want to touch on with you. We had the recent ruling on CBD last week that it's not a drug now, and the Free Movement of Goods Act is applied to it in the European Union. We've got the upcoming W.H.O recommendations this week. How do you see those going, and do you see a massive change? We know that the single convention it's a very blunt instrument to be dealing with this broad sector now. Something that might have been suggestible is to create a more high THC content or products that are, let's say, 80 or 90% THC, and put them in a group that stays on the 1961 narcotic list and take everything off. How do you see that vote going, and do you see any big changes happening in the industry from it?
Well, first of all, I think the Cannabis decision was finally some good news. It was actually a big win. I think that the judgment went further than perhaps we expected. And credit to the Cannabis guys for sticking in there. Credit to Evelyn Allen Overy, their lawyer, who did such a fantastic job. And to the European Industrial Hemp Association, who worked hard lobbying the European Commission on this point. What the European Court found is that there was no evidence of harm being caused to humans by CBD. So they effectively said, although technically CBD would fall under the definition of an extract of cannabis in the convention, to include CBD in that definition would go against the spirit of the convention. The convention is there to protect the public and to make sure that governments can impose bans on the basis of public health. So effectively, the court said there's no grounds for the French ban on CBD, in the interest of public health, because there is no science to support harm being caused to humans. So it was really, really a good decision, but there's still more work to do. As you say, we've got the upcoming W.H.O recommendations, which I think are going to be voted on between tomorrow and Friday, I think. So again, it's really going to be interesting to see what happens, because it was the European Commission that came out and said we're looking at classifying CBD as a narcotic.
Yeah, and I know the states are lobbying to get that done as well.
Exactly. I think Italy did it for a bit and then they suddenly backtracked on it. I think this European Court ruling really undermines that position. I think the European Commission will struggle to hold on to that position that CBD should be classified as a narcotic. The vote is going to be, I really don't know which way it's going to go. It really depends on how much pressure the European Commission is leveraging on independent member states. So look, like I said, great decision in the Cannabis case, but lots more work to do, because we need these changes so that this industry can continue to grow and to flourish across Europe.
I couldn't agree with you more, Robert. I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time out for us. That's been a highly informative show for everybody. I think everybody's going to get a lot of knowledge, information out of that. And I look forward to maybe touching base with you again in the new year, when we might have a few rulings on novel food licenses in March and the stuff that's happened recently.
And we can also discuss what a disaster Brexit has been and what we can do to make it right as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Sounds like a plan. You have a great day, Robert. Thank you very much for joining
Thanks
us.
very much. Thanks
Thanks,
so much.
everybody.
Bye.